Well, we're glad visitors online, and we have some special guests tonight. And I don't know how y'all going to do this, but can you guys put up, we got some folks from Romania. Some people say Romania, some say Romania, and some says romaine noodles, and so I don't know. But what it is, there's Daniel, and his wife's name is Rulia. Is that correct?
Julia. Just like Julia with an I, it's Julia.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you're right, that's right, yeah. And they have children, Paul and David and Nicole, and the name is Deacon, right? And then there's with them John and Maria, and they have the children Rebecca and Ruth and Reuben and Miriam. Luminar. Did I get that right? Luminar. And we were visiting with these folks this afternoon, and they have some interesting things. And so what we're going to do is he's going to have a presentation. He brought some pictures, and they got it into a slideshow. And so anyway, they're going to play it. But if you want to just look at the map here for just a minute, there's Romania. And, you know, there's England up there, and France and Germany. Romania is way over here by the Black Sea. And it's in a very precarious part of the whole world map, and seen a lot of tough things. So I'm going to, here's what's going to, now, John, are you going to come up? Could I ask for you, all of you, pretty soon when you're done with your presentation, could you, the four of you, the two husbands and wives, come up? Because we may want to ask some questions. Nathan was asking some pretty interesting questions. And what we really discovered real quick this afternoon is America is heading down a bad road fast, and these people really see it clear. And so I hope we can get into that. What I'm hoping to do tonight, after he gets done, is have some question time, okay? So as you listen to them and so you think about what's going on in our culture and land today, you might have some questions ready, but we're going to dismiss real sharp at 8 o'clock because Sister Connie, we're having her going away deal tonight. Connie, I want to tell you, we're going to miss you bad. I know, but we're going to miss you bad. And,
my grandbabies are.
Oh, grandbabies are like a magnet. You know, and but anyway, I want you to know we appreciate all the good years you and Brother Paul here, and man alive, it's just, you know, our hearts will always, we have you in our hearts, as Paul said. So anyway, after this, we're going downstairs, and man, I was down there a while ago, and there's all kinds of stuff, and somebody really, that Queen boy back here, could you watch the door, make sure nobody goes downstairs and steals any food while church is going on? I appreciate that. I'm just teasing you. And then I've looked in the freezer, and there is frozen custard, strawberry, chocolate, blackberry, and vanilla, and we're going to set that out, and everybody can just pig out tonight. All righty? So anyway, that's it. So come on up here, Dan, and let's get right into this tonight.
All right. Well, I have to say I'm not a speaker, so I might be a little nervous, but
Plenty of volume. Most of them aren't loud now.
so Romania is 20 million people population, and it's half the size of California. Let me say that, just having an idea on how big Romania is. So we're going to look at three things. Economically tonight, this is before 89, because in 89, that's when the dictator was killed. So economically, politically, and spiritually. So I want to start with one thing. We had no freedom. That's for sure. Every time socialism, communism come in, they take your freedom away. You cannot speak out loud. I mean, you can speak in your closet with yourself. That's about it. Obviously, you cannot own any firearms. That's for sure. And if you would speak out loud, you don't know if anybody is behind you and listening to you, because they had the secret police all the time watching you. There's civilian people that basically are infiltrated all over the place, and this how they keep the fear in you, because you don't know if next day you say something with your friend, and the next day you're going to be picked up and sent to prison. All right, so economically, jobs. There was jobs, basically everybody was working for the state, for the government, because everything was owned by the government. There's no private jobs, there's no private businesses. It's not like you're just going to go and apply for a license or start your own business. There's no such thing in socialism and communism, because they want to control everything. You cannot just create a business and make your own money and have your own business. You cannot apply for any for any loans. Let's say I want to buy a car. I'm just going to apply for a loan. There's no such thing. If you have money, you pay for it. But you can't make enough money to pay for it. So pretty much everybody was, if you work in a factory, everybody was paid the same wage. It's not like based on your competency you get paid more. Everybody gets the same amount of money. And then this is how they keep control of everybody. They know how much you make, they know how much you spend, basically. That's it. You can't be different. A little louder? Okay, I'm trying. Let's see. When you turn 18, if you don't go to college, which it didn't really happen, college wasn't existing. I mean, unless you're like really high up there in society, you would go to army, 1 year mandatory army, and then when you're done, or training, not army, and then when you're done, you have to get a job. There's no way I'm just gonna stay home. If they see you don't work, you get picked up, sent to prison or labor, basically. You get a job, they would give you an apartment, and then that's your life from there on until you die. Again, your only option of work is whatever it was in your town. If there's a factory, you just have to go work in the factory. In my city, we had about 10,000 people. There was a steel factory that would produce all kinds of parts, and there was a carpet factory. So basically, I would say probably 80% of the people would work in that factory, and that was it. That was your option, unless you're like a store seller, you sell bread or anything else. That's about it. There was nothing else. It's not like you have your own business, like I said before. In the countryside, everybody was working the land, whatever land they had left, basically, because when communism came in, all the land that they had, that was taken away. You were probably left with, I would say, like a quarter acre around the house, just to work your thing, and then that's about it. Everything that you had was taken away, and then they would force you work the land that you had before, and that would take everything that you produce off the land. I remember my grandparents, I used to go back there every summer when I was little. There was a truck that would come and collect milk from everybody. They would just stop, I can't remember, is it once a week or twice a week? Whatever milk you had, they would come and collect it from you. It wasn't an option. They're like, I don't want to give it to you. You have to give it away. You have extra eggs, you have to give them away. So this is socialism. This is communism. It's not fun at all, and it's not something that you desire in this country. All right, food. So we can see let's go to the slides. This is a normal day, it was a normal day in Romania. Everybody was sitting in line forever. Let's go to the next slide. You see another one? This is basically a store that would sell milk, bread, some meat. Let's go to the next slide. You see, that happened every day. You would see this picture every day in Romania, in every city, in every town. We can go to the next slide. Again, people in line, poor. I mean, you can tell they're poor. They have nothing. They would walk every day. If they have to walk, there's no transportation unless you have a horse and a carriage. Let's go to the next slide. Again, this is bread. You had to sit in line for bread every single day. Let's go to the next slide. When you go in, this is your option. Let's go to the next slide. Sometimes they have a lot of stuff on the shelf. That's your option right there. You want pickles? This is it. There's one type. Do you want something else? There's one type. It's not like you go to the store, say, honey, which brand do I buy? No. No, it doesn't exist. It's now. It's fine now. But it used to be like this. Transportation. Public transportation was pretty much the only way to travel in town and from city to city. Let's go to the next slide. Another one. Buses were overfilled because people could not afford any car. And then if you go to the next slide, do you see how much traffic is on that street? Yeah, because probably, like in my town, I know people that would talk. In my town, there was 2 cars, 10,000 people. There was 2 cars. And then if for some reason you had a car, in the weekends you were allowed to drive. So there's one weekend what odd number, the other weekend was even, and so on. So if you want to drive somewhere this weekend and your license plate has an odd number and you can't drive, basically your car is useless. So go ahead.
The buildings, those buildings.
So these are the apartment buildings, right, that everybody was living in. What I remember in my town, it was a small town, they would force you to sell your house. Before communism came, people had houses. They would force you to sell the house for a little amount of money, and they would put buildings like this, 10 stories or 4 stories, depend on the town. But that's how everything is concrete. It was cold, it was nasty, molds, and everything else. Go ahead. You want to mention?
You want to mention how you were given an apartment, but
the apartment you wouldn't own, that's for sure.
Right, you wouldn't own, and then you would have a schedule for hot water.
Oh yeah,
light.
yeah. Let's go back to that. You get hot water 2 hours a day. That's probably like from 7 to 9, and then electricity at probably 7 or 8 o'clock. Everybody dark. On the dark side, they will cut the electricity, turn on light up your candle, and that's your life. You can do anything in the house. So that's that. Obviously, everybody would use a stove, and we had a propane tank that you would have to refill. I believe it was once a month. That would come in the city and bring the propane tanks. You take your propane, and if the gas would end up sooner than your month, then you're left with nothing. You cannot cook, you cannot do anything, so you have to eat cold food. We can go to the next slide. Let me see. Okay, so this is Nicolae Ceausescu. He was the leader. Some people call him the Führer, how do you say like the German guy? Führer of Romania. So we're looking at the political party right now. There was one party, and you could not speak against it. I believe, I just read yesterday, before the party was called communism, it was called Socialist Democratic Party, and then all of a sudden they switched to Communist Party, and the Communist Party was called PCR, which stands for I lost it now. Something Communist Party of Romania. Anyway, people would go to vote. Believe it or not, people would go to vote. But the surprise was that every time, the same guy would get like 98% of votes. Guess why? Obviously, there's no option on why do I vote. And if for some reason there was somebody else on a ballot, you wouldn't dare to vote with anybody else, because if you put your stamp on somebody else, next day somebody would visit you and say, "What are you doing? Why?" If you have anything to say against them, hard labor. Let's go to the next slide. This is what all their parties look like, just like North Korea right now, because they took all their ideas from China and North Korea. They have the same mindset, the same concepts, everything is nice and pretty, and let's have a party, and then let's get all together, and everybody's so happy, and then cheer, Ceausescu, Ceausescu. He's the great leader. He loves us and all that, so. But he couldn't say anything else. Yeah. All right. This is 1989, Christmas. So this is when the revolution, people had enough. Everything started in December 1989, December 17. On the west side of Romania, people started rioting because they had enough. Basically, army had all the guns. Somehow, army turned against him, and then civilians were able to get some arms, some guns in their hands to fight against the secret police and then all the police that Ceausescu had. Let's go to the next slide. This is what it looks like. You see the flag. They actually cut the emblem that the Communist Party had in there, and they said this is enough. And we end up with the flag that is just red, yellow, and blue. All right, we can go to the next slide. Again, another day in that revolution that a lot of people died. But they decided that's enough, and it's worth dying for the freedom. All right, let's go to the next slide. It's another one. A lot of buildings were torn apart, burned up. Let's go to the next slide. All right, this is the day they caught him, Christmas Day, 1989. A trial was put together, a kangaroo trial, let me say that, because they said, you're guilty of this, treason, and so many things. Do you have anything to say about it? And he's like, and they're like, we raised you as a parent. Why are you doing this? They had no lawyer, no anything. They probably give him 2 minutes to say something, and they say, okay, you're guilty, no matter what you say. They put him against the wall, and 120 bullets, and they were down. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so now we're going to go to the spiritual side. I'll talk about this family just a little bit. I want to say that Christians back then were real. There were a bunch of Christians back in Romania before 1989. If you would choose to be a Christian, you knew what you were doing. You had to be real. Persecution was real also. I remember that my parents and some other people found themselves together in this town that we lived in, and they said, let's start a church. They bought a house in 1981. That's when I was born. And they had this house for a long time, and they wanted to make that as a church. And then I remember one day, I was probably 6 or 7. The Communist Party obviously closed the doors. We couldn't go in. So what they did is they cut a hole in the brick on the side, and it was probably like 3 feet tall. And we went in for prayer night, and we used candles because we couldn't turn on the lights. And then so many churches, they were demolished. I remember after that we moved into another building. They closed us down, and all the people in there said, we're not doing this. So they cut the locks. But persecution is real. Just look at Cuba, Venezuela right now, North Korea. It's not happiness. Yeah. So many churches were shut down, demolished. Many pastors were picked up and then sent to prison. I want to talk about this pastor right here and his wife. He wrote a book after he came out of the prison. He was in prison about 14 years, I believe. A lot of people probably know the book, Tortured for Christ. and they actually made a movie about 2 years ago. It's about an hour and 10 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes. This pastor was tortured, and so many others, because they believed something else, and then they spoke against the Communist Party. We can go to the next slide. This is basically the picture of the movie. 14 years in communist prison, could not break his faith. And then all the people that went to prison, they did not come out anymore. This pastor did. He actually was able to come over to United States, and then he lived his life after that, because you don't have any option. You either die. Some people did live in there as a Christians, but many of them were persecuted and tortured and killed. I believe there's one more slide. This is the book that he wrote. So anybody that wants socialism and communism, everything, you think everything's for free. Nothing is for free. It's got a cost. Your freedom, it's gone. If you think that I'm going to just get my free college and my free apartment and my free house, you will pay for it. Maybe with your life, maybe with your freedom, and maybe with something else. So, yeah. That's what's going on, and that's what happened back in Romania and in so many other countries that were under communist regimes. Do you want to add something else?
Well, won't you bring won't you have your wives?
Yeah. You guys want to come up here?
And also, while they're coming up, this evening, after I put this up on Facebook, somebody popped up a comment on there. Oh, they've been in democracy for 35 years, basically saying these people wouldn't know what they're talking about. I want you to tell them what their democracy is.
Right, so
how communists affected, even though there was a shift out, even though there was a revolution. So kind of explain, as you all know, you can't believe the news media.
Yeah, so basically it was 30 years, so 1990 to 2020 is 30 years since we've been out of the communism, but for the first 10 years, well, just think about it. The people that took over Romania in 1990, they're all communists. They're all the same mindset. They couldn't break out of it. And yes, they wouldn't oppress people so hard, but it was still some oppression going on. So it took a while to phase out of that mindset. Now, if you go back into Romania and study all these years, Romania, you'll see that the impact that the socialism and communism had, that's probably still there. People are corrupt all the way to the core. It's just mind-boggling. How it's even possible for people to be so corrupt, but they are, because they have the same mindset. They want everything for them. They want to steal. Everybody steals left and right. Just one example, in 30 years, I think we were able to build maybe 500 miles of freeway. Maybe. Not miles, I'm sorry, kilometers, right? But the money, I think the money were there, and we had the time, but all the people that were in charge of building all this infrastructure, everybody grabbing all over the place.
The agencies and bureaucracies.
Yeah.
Can I add something?
Yeah, so that's the microphone right here.
Oh, sorry. So this concept of grabbing for yourself, it's also inherited from communism, because those who had anything during communism was because either they were stealing or they were reporting to the Communist Party and they were getting advantages that way. So, and everybody that would advance would not be a Christian, first of all, and they would have somebody to promote them. So it was kind of, they would have to pay something or give something for their advancement. So it wasn't a real advancement based on merits. It was based on how you would view the party and how you knew somebody in the party that will allow you to be advanced, basically. And one more thing that I think it's important to to note about communism, they infiltrated in the schools. That was one of the ways that they took over people's minds. And I think it's important what we teach our children. I think you all do. I heard many of you are homeschoolers. But one of the things that I first did is to replace the old textbooks, and
With Marxist stuff.
they replaced them. Actually, I was reading, they actually translated textbooks from communist Russia, and they brought them into our country. And history textbooks, they were modified, edited to take away history that was against communism party, against Russia, and basically they deleted parts that would tell what actually happened in World War II and anything that they would have to have against Mother Russia. Everybody had one curriculum. It was for all the country, the same curriculum. And every school had communist clubs, like children were indoctrinated into being enrolled in the Communist Party. They would learn to love the party, to love the dictator, which we had pictures of in every classroom. And
Our father.
I'm sorry?
We called him our father.
Oh, I don't remember that part. She was part of that club. I didn't get to be to be part of the club, right? I was too young, but she went there and they had celebrations. You would go, you would kiss the flag and pledge allegiance to the dictator so those are extremes. But what I want to say is, just because in America, where we're at right now, it might not come the communism or the socialism imposed on you, but they're working at, that's why I wanted to say something about schools. They're working at the kids. They're working at changing their mentality. They too want to change how history was written. Look at the First Amendment being attacked, Second Amendment, all the foundation. That's what they did there. Just that, it was a different history, obviously. They eliminated what it wasn't convenient for them. The same way today they try to eliminate and take out what's inconvenient for the Socialist Democratic Party here. So one more thing. Okay. Teaching religion became forbidden.
Absolutely.
Or Bible lessons, they were not allowed in school. And if you were from a family of true professing Christian, you were named the repenter, and you would receive special treatment. You were persecuted for it, basically, in school. So many tried to keep like a low profile as much as they could, but there were many of them that would stand for the faith when it came. They were called out or they were pointed out. They would stand for their faith. I believe universities were not right. You couldn't, as a Christian, you could not go to university, any superior education. So.
Jackson, right there. What we're seeing right now is just so identical to this, because right now, to be a Christian and to really take a stand at a university, they'll almost cow you out. I mean, it's just like they'll wolf pack you. And we're seeing the same thing, except a little bit different tactics, but they're pushing it as far as they can.
Absolutely.
I mean, just recently, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Prager University and with Turning Point USA, which are conservative and kind of Christian-oriented stuff. They are being banned from college campuses. All across America right now. Twitter is banning, Facebook is banning. I mean, there's an all-out attack on expression of faith in every realm. So what they're telling you is happening there, we're just about 40 years behind them, 30 to 40 years behind them. I mean, we're in a serious situation.
All right, questions?
Go ahead. You want to say anything?
I do. Actually, when people talk about it's been 30 years, right? I think the real change started about 10 years ago. Like he said, the communists were still around, and the mentality was passed on. It's not that, your parents raised you. The parents were taught a certain way. So, like right now they have, because I have been there for 20 years, but they have private hospitals or private clinics. before everything was state-owned and it was free healthcare, right? And 5 years ago, so not that much, not that long ago, my mother had an accident in Romania. She had to buy her own, she had to have her hip replaced. It was a hip? No, the tibia. So that she had to buy her own titanium rod, have it sent to the city she was in. Somebody had to pick it up, not from the hospital. Somebody had to pick it up and bring it to the hospital, give it to them. They had to basically not bribe, but give something to the doctors, to everybody, to the nurses, to the CNA to take care of them. She was not even given a spoon. Okay, they had to give her a spoon from home because she didn't have anything to eat the food with. And my aunt, when she was in the hospital, she would go pretty frequent because she had diabetes. There was no heating. People were putting blankets in the windows and bringing their own, what do you call the heaters? Plug-in, I guess, heaters. Okay. And so it's not, things have not changed mentally-wise, mentality-wise. There's things that you can buy whatever you want, and you can have other jobs. You can have a business right now, and they have private clinics and such, like I said. But there's still pockets of communism that is just the way the mentality has been formed, and it's not going to change unless the new generation comes in and they're going to bring ideas from the outside, which is not a good thing, everywhere, because right now, even in Romania, talking about pride parades and accepting everybody and trying to push that agenda too. So it's not like it's, yay, thank goodness we're out of communism and, now we have a lot of freedom. What I wanted to also add is, it's when this COVID thing started, I had to go to the store. And we had a lot of stuff at home, and so it took about 3 weeks after the crisis started and all the problems with the store, not having food and all that. So 3 weeks later, I went to the store to buy something, and I got there probably half an hour before the store opened. And I thought I was just going to wait for the doors to open and just be the first one there. And I was so shocked to see people in line. And it reminded me of how we had to stay in line. And I just got out and looked at everybody just waiting. There were like 30 to 50 people behind me waiting to get in the store, and you walk in and there's no food everywhere. So those things, when we see things like this, for many Americans, it's not going to ring any bells, and it's not an alarm. But for us, because we live there, we see it. And also the censorship that's happening. We didn't have books. The books that we had, everything was controlled. Everything had to go through a committee that censored, before anything was published, everything had to be okay. And we had a very small library. We couldn't get anything out of, we call it the Occident, the Western states. Everything was Russian literature, Dostoevsky and things like that. Those were permitted. But there was nothing, like she said, to challenge the communists. So when you see people trying to censor your freedom of speech, when you can't post certain things on Facebook, or accounts are being taken off because they speak against the socialist agenda, basically. I think we should have, it's really interesting to me that they let pornography sites up and things that promote bad things, but they will take anything that challenges the official. And that's the thing, it's the official version. It's beginning to look a lot like communism. A lot. So just a piece of warning, if we don't do something about it, if we don't, I'm not saying, get arms and fight that way, but we need to speak up, you know? We can't allow this to happen if we want to keep our freedom. And it's very hard for us to see that we came from there to get freedom here, and it's being just given away. It's not, we're not losing it, we're just being given away. Everybody, because people were taught that way. So I feel like they were brainwashed into just giving the freedom away. They feel like everything is done for their own sake, and it's not.
I myself left Romania when I was 10 years old. So my wife and my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law, they have a little more knowledge. For me, it was just more of what I've heard from my parents and grandparents. The one thing that shocks me is the Constitution. It seems to me that that's the only thing kind of holding back total government control. And I think that once the Constitution is kind of out of the picture and doesn't have power anymore, government will take over. And when I came to Missouri, I was very happy to see a lot of the men have, I call them guns. Yes. And I'm happy because it's, you know, in California it's not like that. You have to go through a special permit. And it's just, you know, a whole lot of headaches. But if the Constitution goes away, since we know what our country has been through, it's going to get tough. It's going to get very tough. So we're hoping that God will. We know He is on our side, and He is in control of everything. But if we don't speak up, it's going to get tough. It's going to get tough. So.
All right, we've got, well, we might say 8 o'clock right now. I'll tell you what, just real quick, if you've got a question or something that you'd like to ask, we'll try to take maybe 3 or 4 questions and not keep everybody out real quick. Yes, real quick.
What's the situation with churches and open worship and, you know, how is that now? Can you talk to people? Can you witness to people?
Yes. Yeah, that has all changed.
By the way, I'll remind you all that Reagan was president from 80 to 88, and he defeated communism by force and power.
Yep.
And that's why all that happened over there. They knew that they had a power that would support that movement. And that was, I mean, really and honestly, Reagan had a great amount to do with the fall of communism per se, and the freedom of a lot of people. And that's why leadership is very, very important. But we do support a missionary in Romania, George Perdea, and some of you might want to write him or get better acquainted with him. But he told me that when the communists came in, his grandpa, they shot his grandpa's horses, took his farm away. Yep. That's what happened, right? When the communists come in, the socialists come in, you couldn't own a farm. You couldn't own anything privately. Your business, nothing, you don't own anything. Okay, a couple more questions. Nathan, you had a question today about money over there. What was it you mentioned?
Well, in our conversation earlier today, they were telling me, you know, you wait in line because there's no food in the store, and they told me that the country raised plenty of food. It was just all sold to other countries.
Listen to this. This got me because I was listening to this conversation. Now, say that last phrase again.
Well, they were able to. Romanians could raise plenty of food to feed their own people.
Right.
But the food was sold to other countries. It was exported. So instead of being, well, and a lot of it being because the currency didn't have any value, they weren't being paid anything, and outsiders, foreigners, would pay more, could afford to pay more for the food because the peasants or the people, the workers, the working class had no money to pay for it, so it was just all exported instead of sold to their own people.
So what Nathan's saying about is what's going on in this nation right now, the devaluation of your money, and this globalism, see, will make it to where other countries can afford to give more money for a box of cereal than you'll be able to when socialism comes in. I want to tell you, this stuff gets dangerous as a cocked cannon. And it's super serious. Anybody else got a question you want to ask them before we go? Oh, yes.
Briefly, what was the history on when socialism, communism took over, when the dictator took over? When did that happen? Was it right after World War II? Or?
40, yeah.
6 or something.
Yeah, 40, I think 45, and then they had 3 years with another dictator, and then this one came along. He stayed 45 years.
What happened was basically, you know the truth, I know you do. Roosevelt gave it away. Am I telling the truth or not?
Yeah, well, they say that there was a meeting with all the big shots,
The big
and
three.
then they had a map, and they divided the plot, and then Russia basically took a very, very thick pencil and went right through.
Stalin,
And took a part of Romania too.
Roosevelt was sick, number one. He wasn't capable. I mean, that's just the flat truth. And he was tired of fighting, and he didn't want to, he knew politically the Americans would stand for another war. And Stalin was at the peak of his health, his vigor, and his ambitions. Is that the Yalta? Was that the Yalta conference? Anyway, it's called the Big Three, right toward the end of the war. And they went in there, and she's exactly right. Stalin walked in there and told Churchill and Roosevelt what he was going to take, and basically implied to them, if you don't give this to me, you'll have us to fight. And they just handed it over. They handed them over like a piece of meat to communism. And it's horrible. If you read the history, if you really dig and read the history of what was happening, how those people were subjected to what they were subjected to. And like I said, Mr. Pordia, missionary we support, they shot his grandpa's horses, took the farm away, and just pillared everything they had and left them. At the time when George Pordia was over here was when this perestroika was happening and the revolution there happened. They were in the process of trying to get their grandpa's farm back from the government. I tell you, I was telling them what an impression George Pordia made on my daddy. Now, my daddy was a keen observer of history and political things. And he understood that this boy understood history probably far better than the average American boy. And my dad told him, he said, if you get that farm back and need a tractor, I'll give you my John Deere 1010 if we can get it over there. That's the honest truth. My dad gave that boy his 1010 John Deere tractor. Never did go over there. George didn't follow through because it probably would have cost more to ship it than his tractor's worth, But he made such an impression about the story of his grandpa's losing his farm to the communists. He said they come walking in there, dropped them in their traces, killed everything, shipped them out. That's your socialism. That's what these Antifa and BLM people are up to. And by the way, can I just say, that's what your Democrat Party's up to. It's just the way it is. I'm sorry, I hate it, but that's what they're up to. Anybody else? Just before we dismiss and go downstairs.
Can I ask one thing, Ray?
You bet you.
I know we don't come here a lot. Health care, big on my list.
Yeah.
I've been sick all my life. I've had 2 kidney transplants in my life. I have a disease that I have to do infusions every other week. That could cost around $300,000 a year. How do they handle someone like me that's really sick and, very expensive to keep alive?
So one thing that had happened, everything was free, but if you wouldn't bribe the doctor, you wouldn't get any surgery.
Wouldn't get no surgery.
Right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't free, basically. You had to bring everybody everything for you to be taken to the doctor and taken care of properly. So.
Yeah.
And then you had to wait a lot of time to get into.
Go ahead.
Free healthcare.
Same thing if you got a ticket, let's say you got a speeding ticket. Just take out the $100 bill, give them to the officer.
Everybody's corrupt.
Everybody's good, No.
Everybody was happy.
So
This is what
it's
happens.
a lot of corruption.
This is what happens to a nation that leaves God. And when Christianity is not in your heart, bribery takes over any nation. Corrupted. That's probably one of the best questions we've had, because I'm going to give you all just something. This healthcare situation right now, because of greed and corruption that's going on, and the amount of influx that the government already has in healthcare, when they flew Jackson from Springfield to Kansas City, The discounted cost on that, Karen, was, Nathan, does anybody remember, I think it's $39,000 some dollars, and that's at the discount price for flying him from Springfield to Kansas City. Who's paying for that?
Taxpayers.
See? And what people know, that if they can get the socialistic system going and everybody's pushing their wealth into the government pockets, then those who are in power are able to pilfer and plunder the wealth of the nation.
Yep.
And that's what we're into. And they will tell you that was about 1.5% of the people were super rich. The president and all his cronies had multiple houses all over the country, lived lavishly. Everybody else is standing in line for a little bit of milk. So I'm telling you what, let's do everything we can to defeat these socialists in every way and every way we can. All right? I tell you what, it's 8:10. I know it's interesting. I so appreciate. Let's stand and give them a hand of appreciation for being here tonight, would you? Thank you, guys. Appreciate you being here. I'm going to say one thing. I listened to them real good. One of the ladies, I don't remember which one today, said that where they live in California, it's just tense. Was it you? And she said, just being back here, they're looking at property. She said, I found myself relaxing. We don't know what we got here, folks. Let's take care of it. Let's take care of it.